De'Aaron Fox has been traded to the San Antonio Spurs to team up with Victor Wembanyama. In a trade that most people expected prior to the trade deadline, the Kings move on from their franchise cornerstone and get an interesting assortment of assets in return. The trade is the Spurs get De'Aaron Fox and Jordan McLaughlin, the Kings get Zach Lavine, Sidi Kosoko, 3 first-round picks, 3 second-round picks, and the Bulls get Zach Collins, Trey Jones, Kevin Huerter, and their own 2025 first-round pick back from San Antonio. Bunch of different angles to tackle this from, but to me, the headline here is San Antonio is on the map as a destination. De'Aaron Fox went to Sacramento and said, I'm not going to be here anymore. I'm signing somewhere else in free agency in 2026. Go ahead and move me to a team of my choice. And the team at the top of his list was the San Antonio Spurs. Guys want to play with Victor Wembanyama, and De'Aaron Fox has positioned himself perfectly to be the main partner alongside the guy that could presumably be the best player in the league over the next decade or so once the Jokic's and the Giannis's and potentially Luka's now in LA of the world move on and pass their prime. And the conversation surrounding the trade itself leading up to this deal largely revolved around what San Antonio would be willing to give up in exchange for De'Aaron Fox, how desperate they were to get him, and how much the Kings would actually take into account Fox's trade preference. And it appears as though they definitely cared about his preference of a trade, and this was the Spurs trade to lose. Let's talk about the deal itself. For San Antonio, this is a massive win for them because when you think about the different versions of a De'Aaron Fox trade that could have happened for San Antonio, there were plenty of people over the last couple of days in the comments on Twitter, various places telling me that Steph Castle had to be in the deal. It was a non-starter. Any deal that involved De'Aaron Fox going to San Antonio was going to involve Steph Castle going to Sacramento in exchange. And not only was Steph Castle not in the deal, Devin Vassell wasn't in the deal. Chris Paul wasn't in the deal. Keldon Johnson wasn't in the deal. They gave up their backup center, their backup point guard, and some picks, only one of which was their own pick. This is best case scenario if you're a Spurs fan in terms of trading for De'Aaron Fox, because you add a guy that wants to be there. You add a guy that is one of the 25 to 30 best basketball players in the world right now. You add a guy that's a really good fit on your roster as a pick and roll partner alongside Victor Wembanyama, and you still have a ton of assets moving forward. And importantly, Steph Castle, Devin Vassell, Jeremy Sohan, those guys, those young pieces you're building around Victor Wembanyama are still on the team, whether they be trade assets in the future or actually good players for you into the future. The big thing for San Antonio is the picks that they gave up. That 2025 Charlotte pick is protected and unlikely to convey as a first-round pick. Is more likely to be a couple of seconds. The 2027 pick from San Antonio themselves, always a little bit scary when you're giving up your own picks, but ultimately Wemby, Fox, whatever pieces they add, they're probably going to be pretty good in 2027, so that's probably a pick in the 20s. And then that 2031 Minnesota pick, which again, the only reason San Antonio has that is because Minnesota traded up for Rob Dillingham in this most recent draft. That's an interesting pick to keep an eye on. If Luka Doncic can get traded overnight to the Lakers, there certainly is the possibility that Anthony Edwards might not be on the Timberwolves in 2031. That could absolutely be valuable, whether it be as a trade asset or as an actual pick moving forward for Sacramento. But it's a pick that if you're San Antonio, you're willing to give up. And in addition, they're sending a pick out to Chicago, but it's Chicago's own first-round pick. It is not the Spurs pick, and a pick that likely was going to be somewhere close to the lottery, somewhere in that 14 to 19 range there for San Antonio, but you're willing to give that up when you're getting De'Aaron Fox. This is a massive win for them, a 10 out of 10, a can't miss. You do this trade every day of the week if you're San Antonio. I love the deal for them. Then we get to the Sacramento Kings, and the Kings are just, it's impossible for them to make a normal trade ever. They always have to make every trade weird, because if you're any team other than the Kings, any franchise other than the Kings, you're looking at this De'Aaron Fox situation, you're evaluating your own roster, and you're thinking, okay, our path towards being true contenders always revolved around Fox getting better, continuing to add assets around him. And now that he's gone, okay, it was a nice couple-year run. It's time to break some things down, trade some pieces away, get some future assets, and then move on. But Sacramento looked at the situation and said, actually, we'd like to replace De'Aaron Fox with, in this case, Zach Lavine. Zach Lavine, who, by the way, has had a very good season this year, and the contract isn't fantastic. He's been injury-prone in the past, but he's very, very good. And Sacramento has valued Zach Lavine for years. One of the first big contracts he got in the league came because Chicago matched his restricted free agency offer from Sacramento. I think it's like 4 years, 72, all those years back when Zach Lavine first hit restricted free agency off his rookie contract. This is a franchise that, like Zach Lavine, has liked him for a while, and they finally land him. I like the fact that they're getting future picks, even though it reads 3 future firsts. It's not actually 3 future firsts. It's more likely 2. You get some second round picks as well. Sidi Kosoko could be pretty solid. I know it's a player that San Antonio liked, but Zach Lavine on the roster is just a strange choice to me. You're running it back with the version of the Chicago Bulls that was the case a couple of years ago. It's Lavine, it's DeRozan, and some other interesting guys. Sabonis is obviously good. Keegan Murray, Keon Ellis is good, I guess. But this is a Sacramento team that's going nowhere. They're not contenders. They're not bad enough to tank. And it is just a weird situation to put yourself in once again. Zach Lavine is good. He's got a good season. It's also definitely possible that he gets injured. Isn't that much of an asset for you moving forward. You just took on a contract that no team around the league was super excited about taking on in exchange for, yes, getting some first-round picks, but also it's De'Aaron Fox. Like, you could argue that despite the season that Zach Lavine is having, last year, Chicago might have had to attach a first to Zach Lavine to get someone to take the deal. And Sacramento took him, traded away De'Aaron Fox, and only got 2 firsts in exchange. So they kind of only got 1 first-round pick in exchange for De'Aaron Fox, depending on your line of thinking. And that is just not a good return, in my opinion, for Sacramento. There's probably reasons for that, which we're going to talk about here in a little bit. But unfortunately, I don't love the deal for the Kings at all. Chicago, on the other hand, I'm seeing a lot of people not loving this deal for the Bulls. I like it for them a lot. You're getting your own future first-round pick back in 2025. You can lose every game the rest of the year of Chicago if you want to, and you have your own pick back. That is massive. I assume that's where everything started for them. They preferred always to deal with San Antonio in some kind of Zach Lavine structure because they wanted their pick back. Trey Jones is good. Zach Collins is fine. Maybe you can get some assets out of him. Kevin Huerter's had a down year, but he's someone that has been valuable in the past to a team like Sacramento. Collectively, those 3 players are probably worth a first-round pick or something close to it. You get your own pick. You get basically another pick in the form of those 3 players. 2 first-round picks in exchange for Zach Lavine. That's pretty good value for Chicago. I like the deal for them a lot. Now, at the end of the day, time will tell how the De'Aaron Fox, Victor Wembanyama fit works out in San Antonio. I'm optimistic. I think it's going to be awesome. They're going to be able to continue to add pieces around that duo, which is going to be very exciting to see. But to me, the headline of this, the bottom line of this, is that it is clear Sacramento had one option here. Their option was to trade with the San Antonio Spurs. That was the top of the list for De'Aaron Fox. That was the team he was most comfortable going to. Remember, he is a free agent in 2026, so he kind of controls where he goes. It's kind of like the Jimmy Butler thing where he can say, hey, I'm not going to sign in Golden State. I'm not going to sign with these other teams. I'm not going to give them the extension. But obviously, he will give San Antonio the opportunity to give him an extension. That's a place that he wants to be at. And it's clear that whether you like the deal or not for Sacramento, I don't love the trade package they're getting in exchange. I don't understand their obsession with adding Zach Lavine. I don't understand the future outlook of their franchise. It's clear that they were a little bit stuck in a corner here, and that once De'Aaron Fox decided not to sign the extension this past offseason, and he gave them a list of teams he'd like to go to, they were pretty much stuck dealing with San Antonio and San Antonio only. I think they could have gotten more here. I don't think they were getting Steph Castle. They certainly weren't getting Devin Vassell, but you probably could have gotten more draft assets here. You could have just excluded the Zach Lavine thing entirely and looked in a different direction as a franchise. It's going to be a weird team. I don't know who the point guard is. I don't know how their team is working. It's like the Bulls West all of a sudden. I thought that when the De'Aaron Fox thing came out, they were going to get some picks for him, maybe move Sabonis, maybe move DeMar DeRozan, keep Keegan Murray around potentially. And now it's a situation where everybody on the team is good, but they're not good enough collectively to really make a difference. It is a weird situation in Sacramento. Spurs are big winners. The Bulls obviously not as big of winners, but I still like the deal for them. And Sacramento, as always, I'm not really sure what the Kings are doing.